Everyone ignored the crying billionaire, except the maid's lonely daughter, who did this. The penthouse suite on the 84th floor of Manhattan's most exclusive residential tower gleamed with the kind of perfection that only unlimited wealth could buy. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city that never sleeps, while Italian marble floors reflected the soft glow of crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's homes. Everything in Alexander Chen's world was meticulously curated, exquisitely designed, and achingly empty. At 33, Alexander had achieved what most people only dreamed about. His tech company had revolutionized cloud computing, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. Magazine covers featured his sharp jawline and intense dark eyes. Business schools studied his strategies. Investors hung on his every word. Yet on this particular Tuesday evening in October, none of that mattered. Alexander sat on the floor of his bedroom closet, knees drawn to his chest, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The call had come 3 hours ago. His mother had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the hospice facility upstate. He'd known it was coming. The cancer had been relentless, and she'd been ready to go. But knowing didn't make the crushing weight of loneliness any lighter. He'd built an empire, but he'd built it alone. No siblings. His father had left when he was 7. Friends from his previous life had fallen away as his wealth grew, replaced by associates who wanted something from him. Relationships had withered under the pressure of 18-hour workdays and the constant suspicion that people loved his money more than they could ever love him. The penthouse was silent except for his ragged breathing. His assistant had sent flowers and a carefully worded condolence email. His board members had expressed sympathy through their secretaries. Even the handful of people he considered close had responded with text messages, as if his grief could be adequately addressed with a few taps on his smartphone screen. Alexander pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they kept coming. His mother had been the only person who'd known him before the money, before the success, before he'd built walls so high that genuine human connection couldn't scale them. She'd been his anchor to the person he used to be, and now that anchor was gone. He didn't hear the soft knock on the bedroom door or the tentative footsteps crossing the threshold. He didn't notice anything until a small, warm hand patted his knee. Alexander's head jerked up, his vision blurred with tears. Crouching in front of him was a tiny girl with dark curls pulled into 2 lopsided pigtails, her brown eyes wide with concern. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, wearing a pink dress with a juice stain on the collar. "You crying?" she stated matter-of-factly, her voice carrying that distinctive toddler lisp. Alexander quickly wiped his face, confusion momentarily overriding his grief. Who are you?" "I'm Lily." She tilted her head, studying him the way children do, with an unsettling directness that adults learn to hide. "Why you sad?" Before Alexander could formulate a response, a woman's voice called out from somewhere in the penthouse. "Lily. Lily, where are you? Baby, you can't wander off like that." Footsteps hurried closer, and a young woman appeared in the doorway, freezing when she saw her daughter crouched in front of the billionaire who was clearly in the middle of a breakdown. Maria Santos was 28, though her face still held a youthful softness that made her look younger. She wore the simple gray uniform of the cleaning service, her long dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. "Mr. Chen." Maria's face flushed with mortification. "I'm so sorry. I turned around for just a second to get my supplies, and Lily, come here right now." But Lily didn't move. Instead, she reached into the small backpack she wore and pulled out a stuffed elephant, its gray fabric worn soft from countless hugs. She held it out to Alexander with both hands. "This is Mr. Snuggles," she said solemnly. "He makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can hold him." Alexander stared at the offered toy, something cracking in his chest. This child, who didn't know who he was or how much money he had, was offering him her most precious possession because she saw that he was hurting. His hand trembled as he reached out and accepted the elephant. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Maria moved forward quickly, clearly anxious to remove her daughter from what was obviously a private moment. "Lily, sweetie, Mr. Chen is busy. We need to let him." "It's okay." Alexander surprised himself with the words. He looked at Maria, really looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes that went beyond professional courtesy. "She's fine. I'm okay." But he clearly wasn't okay, and everyone in the room knew it. Lily sat down cross-legged on the closet floor, apparently settling in. "My daddy went away too," she said, her childish voice carrying a weight of understanding that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Mama says he's in heaven. Is that where your person went?" Maria's face went pale. "Lily, we don't." "My mother," Alexander heard himself say. "She died today." The words hung in the air, and saying them out loud made them real in a way they hadn't been before. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks, and he didn't even try to stop them. Lily nodded seriously, as if he'd just confirmed something important. Then, with the pure instinct of a child who hasn't yet learned that the world has rules about personal space and appropriate boundaries, she climbed into his lap and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay to cry," she whispered into his shoulder. "Mama says tears are how sad comes out so happy can come back in." Alexander's arms came up automatically, holding this small human who was offering him comfort without expecting anything in return. And there, on the floor of a closet that cost more than most houses, surrounded by designer suits and Italian shoes, the billionaire who had everything and nothing at all broke down completely. Maria stood frozen in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching her daughter do what countless adults had failed to do, treat Alexander Chen like a human being who was suffering, rather than a powerful man who needed to maintain appearances. And for the first time in years, Alexander didn't feel quite so alone. Maria's first instinct was to pull Lily away, apologize profusely, and get them both out of the penthouse before she lost the cleaning job that barely kept them afloat. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Alexander's shoulders shook as he held her daughter. Maybe it was the raw vulnerability on the face of a man whose image she'd only ever seen looking composed and confident in business magazines. Maybe it was just the memory of her own grief, still fresh even 2 years after her husband's death. She knew what it felt like to cry alone in the dark, wondering if anyone in the world truly cared that your heart was breaking. So instead of grabbing Lily and fleeing, Maria quietly stepped into the closet and sat down on the floor beside them, her hand hovering uncertainly before gently resting on Alexander's shoulder. She didn't say anything. What could she say? Platitudes wouldn't help. She'd learned that when her own world had collapsed. They sat like that for several minutes, the only sound Alexander's ragged breathing and Lily's soft humming of a lullaby Maria used to sing to her at bedtime. Slowly, the storm of grief began to pass, leaving Alexander drained but somehow lighter. When he finally lifted his head, Maria quickly withdrew her hand, suddenly aware of the profound inappropriateness of the situation. She was the cleaning lady, and she'd just put her hand on a billionaire's shoulder while her toddler sat in his lap. "I should go," Maria said quietly, reaching for Lily. "I'm so sorry for intruding on your privacy." This was completely unprofessional. "No." Alexander's voice was hoarse, but firm. He gently transferred Lily from his lap to the floor, still clutching the stuffed elephant. "No, please don't apologize." "I thank you. Both of you." He stood up slowly, as if testing whether his legs would hold him, and wiped his face with the back of his hand. For a moment, he looked lost, a little boy in a man's body, who didn't know what to do next. Lily tugged on his pants leg. "Are you hungry? When I'm sad, Mama makes me mac and cheese. It's my favorite." Despite everything, Alexander felt a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "I don't think I have mac and cheese. You have a big kitchen," Lily pointed out with unassailable toddler logic. Big kitchens should have mac and cheese. Maria's cheeks flushed again. Lily, that's not. Mr. Chin probably has dinner plans, or… I don't, Alexander interrupted. I don't have any plans. He looked at Maria, really looked at her, seeing the fatigue around her eyes, the way her uniform hung a bit loose on her frame, the calluses on her hands from hard work. Have you two eaten? Maria's back straightened. We're fine. We'll eat when we get home. But Lily, with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old, chose that moment to announce, my tummy is growling like a bear. Alexander saw something flicker across Maria's face, embarrassment mixed with resignation. He understood in that moment that we'll eat when we get home probably meant whatever Maria could scrape together from a nearly empty refrigerator after a long day of cleaning other people's homes. I have a kitchen full of food I'm not going to eat, he said carefully, not wanting to offend her pride. And, honestly, I don't want to be alone right now. Would you? Would you both stay? Just for a little while. Maria hesitated, torn between caution and the very real fact that Lily needed dinner and their own apartment was an hour away by subway. There was also something in Alexander's eyes that she recognized, the desperate need for human connection that went beyond charity or pity. Please, Alexander added quietly. Your daughter just gave me her most treasured possession to make me feel better. Let me at least feed you both. Lily grabbed her mother's hand and tugged. Please, Mama? I'm really hungry, and Mr. Chin is sad and needs friends. Maria's resistance crumbled. Okay, but just for a little while, and then we need to let Mr. Chin rest. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design, all stainless steel and black granite, with appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. Maria felt out of place among the gleaming surfaces, but Lily was delighted, spinning in circles on the polished floor. Alexander opened the enormous refrigerator, which was stocked by his personal chef with prepared meals in neat containers. He stared at them blankly, realizing he had no idea what a 3-year-old would eat. I have salmon with asparagus? Quinoa salad? There's some kind of soup. He turned to Maria helplessly. Despite herself, Maria smiled. Do you actually have mac and cheese? I don't know. Maybe. Alexander started opening cabinets randomly, clearly unfamiliar with his own kitchen. Maria made a decision. She washed her hands and gently moved him aside. May I? Please. She found pasta in one cabinet, cheese in the refrigerator, milk, butter. Within minutes, she was at the stove, cooking with an efficiency born of years of making meals on a tight budget and limited time. Lily climbed onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island, swinging her legs and chattering away to Alexander about her stuffed animals, her favorite cartoons, and the ducks she'd seen at the park. Alexander pulled out a stool and sat next to her, still holding Mr. Snuggles, and listened. Really listened. Not the way he listened in board meetings, already formulating his response before the other person finished talking. He listened the way you listen to music or rain, letting it wash over him, finding comfort in the simple sound of a child's voice filling the empty spaces of his home. Maria watched them from the corner of her eye as she stirred the pasta. This was the man whose face appeared on the cover of Fortune magazine, who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. Right now, he looked young and fragile, nodding solemnly as Lily explained the intricate social hierarchy of her stuffed animal collection. When the mac and cheese was ready, Maria served it in expensive ceramic bowls that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. They sat at the kitchen island together, an unlikely trio brought together by grief and kindness and the simple human need for connection. Lily ate with gusto, getting cheese sauce on her chin and talking between bites. Maria ate more slowly, still feeling the strangeness of the situation. Alexander barely touched his food, but he stayed at the table, finding unexpected comfort in this domestic scene. Your daughter is very special, he said to Maria softly while Lily was distracted by trying to get every last noodle onto her spoon. She is, Maria agreed, her voice thick with love. She's been through so much, but she still sees the good in everyone. She still wants to help. Her father, Alexander, began hesitantly. Lily said, "He went to heaven?" Maria nodded, her throat tight. 2 years ago. Construction accident. One day he kissed us goodbye, and then he was gone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. About your mother. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they recognized each other. Two people who understood loss, who knew what it meant to wake up and realize the world had fundamentally changed and would never be the same again. Lily looked up from her bowl and smiled, cheese sauce on her nose. And somehow, in that expensive kitchen with its perfect appliances and its lonely owner, it felt like they were exactly where they needed to be. Over the following weeks, something extraordinary happened, something that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew Alexander Chen's carefully controlled, meticulously scheduled life. He started looking forward to Tuesdays and Fridays. Those were the days Maria cleaned his penthouse. And those were the days Lily came with her. It had started the week after his mother's funeral. Maria had shown up for her regular shift, apologizing again for the previous week's intrusion and assuring him it wouldn't happen again. Her usual sitter had recovered from her flu, so Lily would be taken care of elsewhere. Alexander had felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "She can come here," he'd found himself saying, "if it's easier for you. I work from home on Tuesdays and Fridays anyway." Maria had looked at him skeptically. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the kindness, but a 3-year-old in a penthouse full of expensive things." "I don't care about the things," Alexander had interrupted, surprised by how true it was. "Please. She's welcome here." And so a routine had developed. Maria would arrive at 9 in the morning, Lily in tow with her little backpack full of toys and books. While Maria cleaned, Lily would set up her stuffed animals in Alexander's living room, creating elaborate scenarios that he found himself getting pulled into during breaks from his video conferences. He'd been in the middle of a call with Tokyo investors when Lily had wandered into his office, Mr. Snuggles tucked under her arm. "Excuse me," she'd whispered loudly, in the way children do when they're trying to be quiet but haven't quite mastered volume control. "Mr. Snuggles needs to tell you something important." Alexander had muted his microphone, trying not to smile. "What does Mr. Snuggles need to tell me?" Lily had brought the elephant close to her ear, nodding seriously as if receiving vital information. "He says you've been working too long and should have a snack. Snacks are important for brains." The executives in Tokyo had waited, probably imagining he was dealing with some crucial business matter, while Alexander had solemnly agreed with Mr. Snuggles and allowed Lily to lead him to the kitchen, where they'd shared apple slices with peanut butter that Maria had packed. It became a pattern. Lily would interrupt him at regular intervals, forcing breaks he wouldn't have otherwise taken. She'd insist he read stories with her, or help build block towers, or have tea parties with her stuffed animals. And Alexander found himself saying yes to all of it, discovered that these small interruptions were the best parts of his day. He started keeping the things she liked in the apartment: juice boxes, goldfish crackers, crayons, and coloring books. Maria had protested at first, insisting he didn't need to do any of this, but Alexander had waved off her concerns. "I like having her here," he'd admitted one Tuesday afternoon, watching Lily color at his dining table while Maria cleaned the guest bathrooms. "She makes this place feel less like a museum and more like a home." Maria had paused in the doorway, cleaning supplies in hand, and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "She adores you. You know that, right? She talks about Mr. Alex all the time at home." The nickname had started the second week. Alexander had become Mr. Alex, and he'd found he liked it infinitely more than being called Mr. Chen. "The feeling is mutual," Alexander had said softly. But it wasn't just Lily who was changing his life. It was Maria, too. She moved through his space with quiet efficiency, but unlike his previous cleaning service, she left small touches of warmth. Fresh flowers in a vase on the kitchen counter. His favorite coffee mug left out, and ready each morning. Books reorganized not by color or size but by subject, making them actually useful. Small things that showed someone was paying attention to him as a person, not just as a client. They'd started talking during Lily's nap times. Maria would make tea. She'd found his collection of expensive teas he'd never touched and started actually using them, and they'd sit in the kitchen while Lily dozed on the couch, surrounded by her stuffed animals. Those conversations were unlike any Alexander had experienced in years. Maria didn't want anything from him. She didn't know about his business dealings and didn't care. She didn't flutter her eyelashes or laugh too hard at his jokes. She treated him like a regular person, calling him out when he said something out of touch with reality, challenging his assumptions, sharing her own stories. He learned about her life in pieces. How she'd met her husband, Carlos, at a community college where they'd both been taking night classes. How he'd been studying to be an engineer while working construction to pay the bills. How they'd been so happy, even though they'd had almost nothing. How his death had shattered her world, leaving her with a toddler and a mountain of debt from medical bills. I clean houses because the hours are flexible and I can sometimes bring Lily with me, she told him one Friday, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. It's not what I imagined I'd be doing at 28, but it keeps us afloat. Barely. Alexander had wanted to fix it, to throw money at her problems the way he solved everything else in his life. But he'd learned enough to know that Maria's pride wouldn't accept charity. She worked for everything she had, and she wanted to keep it that way. Instead, he found himself doing smaller things, leaving extra cash in places where she'd find it and might assume it had been there all along, recommending her services to other residents in the building, insisting on paying her more because she was now providing childcare consultation services during her shifts. "You're not subtle," Maria had told him one day, her eyes sparkling with amusement and exasperation. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Alexander had replied, deadpan. "The $100 bill I found in your couch cushions? The one that was definitely not there last week because I cleaned those cushions. Must have fallen out of my pocket. Aha. And I suppose you just happened to tell Mrs. Harrison on the 79th floor that you knew an excellent cleaning service? She mentioned she was looking. I mentioned I knew someone reliable." Maria had shaken her head, but she'd been smiling. "You're impossible. I've been called worse." The truth was, Alexander was happier than he'd been in years. His penthouse no longer felt like a gilded cage. The silence that had once been oppressive was now filled with Lily's laughter and Maria's humming as she worked. He found himself actually looking forward to coming home instead of staying at the office until exhaustion forced him back. His assistant had noticed the change. "You seem different," she'd commented during a video call. "More relaxed, maybe?" Alexander had glanced over at his living room, where Lily was setting up an elaborate veterinary clinic for her stuffed animals, using his throw pillows as examination tables. "I guess I am," he'd admitted. But he knew it couldn't last. Good things in Alexander's life never did. The universe had a way of taking back any happiness he managed to find. He just didn't know when the other shoe would drop. It came on a Friday in late November. Maria arrived for her shift looking pale and stressed, dark circles under her eyes. Lily was quieter than usual, her normal exuberance dimmed. "Is everything okay?" Alexander asked after Maria had been there for an hour, cleaning with a distracted intensity that was unlike her. She looked up from scrubbing his already spotless kitchen counter. "It's fine. Everything's fine." It clearly wasn't fine. "Maria." She set down the sponge and braced her hands against the counter, her shoulders tight. "My landlord is selling the building. We have 60 days to find a new place." Alexander felt a chill. "That's illegal, isn't it? Don't you have more protection than that?" "Not if the building is being converted to condos. And in New York, finding an affordable apartment that will take a single mother and a toddler?" She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I've been looking. Everything is either too expensive or in neighborhoods where I wouldn't feel safe, or they want first month, last month, security deposit and broker's fee all up front. I don't have that kind of money. How much do you need? Maria's eyes flashed.
No.
Absolutely not. Maria? I'm not taking money from you, Alexander. It was the first time she'd used his first name without the Mr. It felt intimate and painful all at once. I'm not a charity case. I never thought you were. Then don't treat me like one. Her voice cracked slightly. I'll figure it out. I always do. But as Alexander watched her return to cleaning with renewed vigor, clearly using physical work to burn off anxiety, he wondered how many times one person could be expected to figure things out alone before they broke under the weight of it all. And he wondered what he could do to help without making her feel like she was losing her dignity in the process. The solution came to Alexander at 3 a.m, the way most of his best ideas did. He sat up in bed, reaching for his phone to make notes before the thought disappeared. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, he had a plan. Now, he just had to convince Maria to accept it without her pride getting in the way. He spent the weekend making calls, setting things in motion. By Tuesday morning, when Maria arrived with Lily, everything was ready. I need to talk to you about something, he said after she'd been there for about an hour. Can we sit down? Maria's expression immediately became wary. If this is about money, it's about a job. A different job. Alexander gestured to the kitchen table, where he'd laid out a folder of documents. Will you at least listen before you say no? Reluctantly, Maria sat down. Lily was already in the living room, setting up an elaborate hospital for her stuffed animals, narrating the various emergencies they were experiencing with 3-year-old creativity. Alexander opened the folder. My mother was a teacher before she got sick. She always believed education was the way out of poverty. When she died, she left me a substantial sum with very specific instructions. He slid a piece of paper toward Maria, his mother's handwritten letter, one of the last things she'd written before the cancer had made writing impossible. Maria read it slowly, her eyes widening. Use this money to help someone who has the potential, but not the opportunity. Someone who works hard but can't seem to get ahead because the system is rigged against them. Someone like we were. She looked up at Alexander. Your mother wrote this? 6 months before she died. She made me promise to honor it. Alexander pulled out another document. You told me once that you were taking night classes before Carlos died. Computer programming, right? Maria's hand went to her throat. That was years ago. I never finished. But you wanted to. You were good at it, weren't you? Yes. I loved it. But after Carlos died, I had to drop out. I couldn't work, take care of Lily, and go to school. Something had to give. Alexander slid a brochure across the table. It was for an intensive coding boot camp, one of the best in New York. This program is 16 weeks. They have a partnership with my company and several others. Upon completion, graduates are guaranteed interviews with participating companies. The average starting salary for their graduates is $85,000 a year. Maria stared at the brochure like it was written in a foreign language. Alexander, I can't afford. My mother's fund will cover tuition. That's what it's for. But there's more. He pulled out another document. You can't work while doing the program. It's too intensive. And you need childcare for Lily. So here's what I'm proposing. You move into my guest wing. What? Maria's voice came out as a squeak. I have 3 bedrooms I never use. The guest wing has its own entrance, bathroom, small kitchen. You and Lily would have complete privacy. In exchange for rent and childcare, I'd like to hire you as my household manager. Someone to make sure I actually eat meals, remember to sleep occasionally, and maybe organize my life, so it's less about work and more about actually living. And Lily would have someone to play with who desperately needs to learn how to fun again. Maria was shaking her head before he finished. That's insane. I can't just move in here. I can't let you, this is too much.
Why?
You'd be working for it. I'd be paying you a salary for household management. The boot camp is for my mother's fund, which has to be used anyway. And you'd be helping me as much as I'd be helping you. How could I possibly be helping you? Maria demanded. Alexander's voice went quiet. Before you and Lily started coming here, I was alone in this penthouse wondering why I'd built an empire when I had no one to share it with. I was so lonely I could barely breathe. You two gave me a reason to come home. You gave me a family, even if it's not traditional. That's worth more than money. Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks. I can't accept this. It's too much. Then do it for Lily. Alexander played his trump card, feeling only slightly guilty about it. In this building, there's a children's playroom, a park across the street, security, good schools nearby. You said yourself you can't find an affordable place in a safe neighborhood. Here, she'd be safe. She'd have stability. You could focus on the boot camp knowing she was taken care of. Maria buried her face in her hands. You're not playing fair. I know. I'm sorry. From the living room, Lily called out. Mama, Mr. Alex, the teddy bear needs emergency surgery. I need both of you. They looked at each other across the table, this unlikely pair brought together by grief and kindness and the simple human need for connection. 3 months, Maria finally said, her voice muffled by her hands. I'll try it for 3 months through the boot camp. But I'm paying rent, even if it's just a little bit. And I'm working for everything else. No free rides.
Deal.
Alexander extended his hand. Maria looked at it for a long moment before shaking it. Her hand was small in his, calloused from hard work, but her grip was firm. Mama, the teddy is dying. Lily's voice held a note of genuine distress. We better go, Maria said, a watery laugh escaping. Dr. Lily doesn't handle losing patients very well. The move happened the following weekend. Maria didn't have much. A few boxes of clothes, Lily's toys, some kitchen items, photographs. Alexander had never seen how the other half lived, not really, and the sight of everything Maria owned fitting into his SUV made something hurt in his chest. The guest wing had been in use since he'd bought the penthouse 4 years ago. He'd had it thoroughly cleaned and stocked with basics, but Maria insisted on doing her own deep clean before moving in. Alexander helped, finding himself actually enjoying the physical work, the way it quieted his always racing mind. Lily was delighted with her new room. Alexander had secretly hired a decorator to make it child-friendly. Soft carpet, blackout curtains for nap time, shelves at her height for toys, even a small reading nook with cushions. When Lily saw it, she'd squealed with joy and thrown her arms around his legs. This is the best room ever. Can Mr. Snuggles and all his friends live here too? Of course they can. It's your room now. Maria had pulled him aside later while Lily was arranging her stuffed animals. You hired a decorator. I might have. The reading nook has cushions that match her favorite color. Does it? I hadn't noticed. Alexander. Maria's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. Really. He'd wanted to hug her, but he'd settled for a gentle touch on her shoulder. You're welcome. Both of you. That first week was an adjustment. Alexander was used to living alone, used to silence, and his own schedule. Now there were sounds of life throughout the penthouse. Lily's laughter, Maria singing in Spanish as she cooked, the TV playing cartoons in the morning. His refrigerator was actually full of real food instead of prepared meals from a chef. There were toys in his living room and crayons on his coffee table. It should have driven him crazy. Instead, he loved every minute of it. Maria started the boot camp the following Monday. Alexander adjusted his schedule so he could be there when Lily woke up, making her breakfast and helping her get dressed. He'd never realized how complicated getting a 3-year-old ready for the day could be. Lily had opinions about everything, which shirt to wear, whether her hair should be in pigtails or a ponytail, what kind of cereal was acceptable. Apparently it changed daily based on complex criteria he couldn't decipher. His first solo morning had been chaos. He'd somehow managed to put Lily's shirt on backward, forgotten that she needed her hair brushed, resulting in a 15-minute standoff when he tried to fix it and gave her juice in the wrong cup, which was apparently a catastrophe of epic proportions. By the time Maria got back from her first class, Alexander was exhausted, humbled, and had newfound respect for single parents everywhere. "How did it go?" Maria had asked, trying not to smile at his disheveled appearance. "She's a tiny tyrant," Alexander had said, but his tone was affectionate. "How does she have so many opinions?" "She's 3. Wait until she's a teenager," Maria had laughed. But they'd fallen into a rhythm. Alexander discovered he was actually pretty good at playing pretend, at reading the same story 17 times in a row, and making Lily laugh with silly voices. He started leaving work early, something he'd never done before, so he could have dinner with Maria and Lily. Those dinners became the highlight of his day. They'd sit at the kitchen table, Lily chattering about her day at the building's playroom with the nanny Alexander had hired, Maria sharing what she'd learned in class. Alexander would talk about his work, but in simple terms, and both Maria and Lily would ask questions that made him think about things differently. "Why do you work so much if you don't need more money?" Lily had asked one evening with that devastating childhood directness. Alexander had paused, really thinking about it. "That's a good question. I guess I don't know how to do anything else." "You could play more," Lily had suggested. "Playing is important." "You're absolutely right," Alexander had agreed solemnly. "I should play more."
And he did.
He found himself leaving his phone in another room during dinner, taking weekends actually off, building blanket forts and having tea parties and reading stories. Slowly, the driven businessman who'd built an empire was remembering how to be a person who enjoyed life. But as the weeks passed and Maria excelled in her boot camp program, Alexander began to feel a creeping dread. What would happen when the 3 months were up? Would Maria and Lily leave, taking all the warmth and laughter with them? Would his penthouse go back to being a beautiful, empty cage? And underneath that fear was something else, something he was afraid to name. When he looked at Maria, he didn't just see his household manager or his friend. He saw a woman who was brilliant and strong and kind. He saw someone who challenged him and cared about him not for his money, but for who he was. He saw someone who made him want to be better. He was falling in love with her. Maybe he'd been falling since that first night when she'd sat beside him in his grief instead of running away. But he had no idea if she felt the same way. And he was terrified that if he said anything, he'd lose the best thing that had ever happened to him. The knock on Alexander's office door came on a Tuesday evening in late February, 2 weeks before Maria's boot camp was scheduled to end. He looked up from his laptop to find her standing in the doorway, still in her professional clothes from class. She'd started dressing differently as the program progressed, more confident, more polished. She looked beautiful and nervous. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "For you?" "Always." Alexander closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. Maria came in and sat down across from his desk, her hands twisting in her lap. "I got a job offer today." Alexander felt his heart stop. This was what they'd been working toward, what the whole arrangement had been about. He should be happy for her. He was happy for her. But the thought of her leaving made him feel like he was drowning. "That's wonderful," he managed. "Where?" "2 offers, actually. One from a startup in Brooklyn, good salary, interesting work, but it's a long commute, and the hours would be unpredictable. The other is from a gaming company in Midtown. Better salary, more stable hours, but the work is less challenging." She paused. "Both want me to start in 3 weeks. What are you going to choose?" "I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to you." Maria met his eyes. "The 3 months are almost up. We agreed this was temporary until I got back on my feet. Well, I'm back on my feet now. I have options. I can afford to get Lily and me our own place again." Alexander felt panic rising in his chest. "You don't have to leave." "Don't I?" Maria's voice was soft. "Alexander, you've been incredibly generous. You gave us a home when we needed it, helped me restart my career, gave Lily stability. But we can't stay here forever. This isn't real life." "Why not?" Alexander stood up, coming around his desk. "Why can't this be real life?" "Because it's not sustainable. Because you were being kind to someone going through a hard time, and that hard time is over now." Maria stood too, wrapping her arms around herself. "Because I can't keep living in your guest wing, letting you pay for everything, pretending." "Pretending what?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Pretending that this is something it's not. That we're something we're not." Alexander's heart was pounding. This was it, the moment where he could play it safe, let her go back to his lonely existence. Or he could take the biggest risk of his life. "What if I want us to be something?" The words came out quiet but firm. "What if this is the most real my life has been in years?" Maria stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when you and Lily moved in, my life changed. I'm saying that I look forward to coming home now because you're both here. I'm saying that I've never been happier than I've been these past few months." Alexander took a step closer. "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Maria. And I love Lily like she's my own daughter. And the thought of you leaving is tearing me apart." Tears were streaming down Maria's face now. "You don't mean that. You're grateful, and maybe you feel responsible for us, but that's not. Don't tell me what I feel." Alexander's voice was gentle but insistent. "I know what gratitude feels like. I know what responsibility feels like. This is different. You're different. You see me, the real me, not the billionaire, not the CEO. You call me out when I'm being an idiot. You make me laugh. You make me want to be better. That's not gratitude, Maria. That's love." "I'm your employee," Maria whispered. "You're my family." Alexander reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hands in his. "These past few months, you and Lily have been more family to me than most people I'm related to by blood. And I know this is complicated. I know there's a power imbalance, and I know you might not feel the same way. But I had to tell you, before you make a decision about leaving, you need to know how I feel." Maria was crying openly now. "I do feel the same way. God help me, I do. I've been trying so hard not to, telling myself it was just gratitude, or that I was projecting my feelings onto you, because you've been so good to us. But when Lily talks about you, when she says things like, 'I wish Mr. Alex was my daddy,' my heart breaks because I want that too. I want this to be real. But I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of everything." Maria pulled one hand free to wipe her eyes. "Of this being some kind of pretty woman fantasy that falls apart in reality. Of you waking up one day and realizing you don't want a ready-made family. Of Lily getting attached and then losing another father figure. Of people thinking I'm just after your money. Of—" Alexander gently pulled her into his arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Maria let him. She buried her face in his chest, and he held her, his hand stroking her hair. "I'm terrified too," he admitted. "I've never done this before. Real love, real family. I'll probably screw it up 1,000 times. But I'd rather try and fail with you than succeed at anything else without you. And as for what other people think," he pulled back enough to look at her face. "I've spent my whole life worrying about other people's opinions. It's exhausting. I'm done with it. The only opinions that matter are yours and mine and Lily's." "Lily would vote yes in a heartbeat," Maria said with a watery laugh. "She adores you. And you." Alexander's voice was vulnerable in a way he'd never let it be in a boardroom. "What's your vote?" Maria looked up at him, really looked at him. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the hope, the fear. She thought about the man who'd sat on his closet floor accepting comfort from a 3-year-old. The man who'd learned to make mac and cheese and braid hair. The man who left work early to have dinner with them, who read the same bedtime story over and over without complaint, who'd given them a home when they needed it most. She thought about her late husband, Carlos, and what he would want for her and Lily.
He'd want them to be happy.
He'd want them to be loved. He wouldn't want her to spend the rest of her life alone out of loyalty to his memory. My vote, she said slowly, is that I'm still terrified. But I'm willing to try if you are. No promises that it'll work out. No fairy tale guarantees. Just two people who care about each other figuring it out together. That's all I'm asking for. Alexander's smile was brighter than she'd ever seen it. A chance to figure out together. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Maria rose up on her toes and met him halfway. The kiss was soft and tentative and perfect, full of promise and hope. From somewhere in the penthouse came Lily's voice. Mama? Mr. Alex? Where are you? It's story time. They broke apart, laughing. We should probably tell her, Maria said. Tell her what, exactly? Alexander asked. That what are we? I don't know.
Together?
Dating? It seems weird to say dating when we live together. We'll figure it out, Alexander said, taking her hand.
Come on.
Dr. Lily is very strict about her story time schedule. They found Lily in her room, surrounded by her stuffed animals, a pile of books ready to be read. There you are, she said with the exasperation of someone much older. Mr. Snuggles was getting worried. Alexander and Maria sat down on either side of her on her bed, and Lily immediately climbed into Alexander's lap, handing him the first book. Can I ask you something, Lily? Alexander said, his heart pounding. Uh-huh. Lily was already opening the book to the first page. How would you feel if I was around all the time? Not just when your mom is in school, but always? If we were a family? Lily looked up at him with those big brown eyes. Then she looked at her mother, who was nodding encouragingly. Like a real family? Lily asked. With a mama and a daddy and a little girl? If you want, Maria said softly. Would you like that? Lily's face split into the biggest smile either of them had ever seen.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. She threw her arms around Alexander's neck. Can I call you Daddy instead of Mr. Alex? Alexander's eyes filled with tears. He looked at Maria over Lily's head, and she was crying too, but they were both smiling. I would love that, Alexander managed to say around the lump in his throat. I would be honored. Okay, Daddy, Lily said, settling back into his lap as if everything had just been decided and they could move on to more important things. Now read the story. And do the voices right this time. The dragon doesn't sound like that. Alexander laughed and started to read, Maria leaning against his shoulder, Lily safe and warm in his arms. And in that moment, in a penthouse that had once been so lonely it echoed, surrounded by stuffed animals and children's books and all the beautiful chaos of family life, Alexander Chin finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. Epilogue, 1 year later. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the penthouse with only close friends and family. Maria wore a simple white dress that made her look radiant. Alexander couldn't stop smiling. And Lily, as the flower girl, took her duties very seriously, making sure every petal was placed just so. As they exchanged vows, Lily stood between them, holding both their hands. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Lily giggled and said, "Gross," making everyone laugh. Maria had taken the job with a startup in Brooklyn, turning it into one of the hottest gaming companies in New York. Alexander had stepped back from some of his responsibilities, hiring a CEO to run the day-to-day operations so he could focus on innovation and, more importantly, on his family. They'd adopted a dog, a rescue that Lily had fallen in love with at first sight. The penthouse, once pristine and untouched, now showed signs of life everywhere. Toys in corners, drawings on the refrigerator, a dog bed in the living room, photographs on every surface. On their wedding night, after Lily was asleep and the guests had gone, Alexander and Maria stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. "Do you ever miss it?" Alexander asked. "The way things were before? Simple, less complicated." Maria thought about her tiny apartment, the constant struggle to make ends meet, the loneliness of being a single parent. Not for a second, she said, leaning into him. This is complicated and messy, and sometimes chaotic. But it's real. And it's ours. Thank you, Alexander said softly. For what? For teaching me that the things that matter most can't be bought. For showing me what it means to be part of a family. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. You were never unlovable, Maria said, turning to face him. You were just alone. There's a difference. From Lily's room came a small voice. Mama?
Daddy?
I can't sleep. Can Mr. Snuggles and I come sleep with you? They looked at each other and smiled. Come on, sweetheart, Maria called back. Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching Mr. Snuggles, her hair a mess from tossing and turning. They all climbed into bed together. Alexander, Maria, Lily, and even the dog, who wasn't technically allowed on the furniture but had long since learned that rules in this household were flexible when it came to cuddles. As Alexander lay there in the darkness, his wife on one side and his daughter on the other, he thought about that night over a year ago when he'd been sitting on his closet floor, broken and alone. He thought about how a small girl with a stuffed elephant had changed everything. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest wealth isn't measured in money or success or power. It's measured in moments like this, in the warmth of family, in the sound of the people you love breathing beside you, in the knowledge that you matter to someone not for what you have but for who you are. He'd been ignored by everyone that night, everyone except a lonely maid's daughter who'd seen a person in pain and had wanted to help. That simple act of kindness had saved him in ways he was still discovering. And now, he wasn't just a billionaire. He was a husband, a father, a part of something bigger than himself. He was finally home.